there are people that I have sat down with, I kid you not, they are not in the original body they were born in. And the problem with that is you run into weird legalities in the spirit world, because it's like the person is making claims on what they want God to do, but the counter argument from the spirit world is this physical body is property of the US government. Therefore, their requests for freedom from these things do not apply. And so then we have to figure out, well, how do we get around that legality? You have to imagine.
Dude.
I have been very quiet on a lot of
Are we
things.
putting this behind a paywall or on a different channel?
So we have a whole prayer resource just to get authority to do deliverance on the clone body. I teach my students this stuff. This
Does it work? I cannot leave this open loop longer.
I have a lot of
Does it
questions.
work?
Of course it works.
So God gives you. We just need to give a second.
Do we have pictures of anything of these underwater cats?
No, stop. Does it do? Hold on.
Okay.
Thank you for that. We're gonna go back into Dan's normal pace in just a second, but I actually have to slow down now. This is the second time in history on this show that I've slowed us down. I have a question.
Yes.
The legal argument from the spirit when you're praying through this is God making an adjustment to the legal system, or is this always God's intent to save people who are not even their original body? Like, what's the legality happening in the spirit? How do you resolve that?
Exactly. So you can imagine my shock when I'm sitting in these kinds of situations. I remember a couple years ago, I was doing an intensive. So one of my intensives, so I have 60 people sitting there, and I have a girl come up, and she's like, so both of my parents are clones, and this is in front of 60 people.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, no, she looks like a normal person. Mm-hmm. She's a wonderful girl. I mean, great. Hangs out at our church. I mean,
But she's not a clone.
So I'm just saying, like, this was a real shocker for me. And so we did ministry demonstration, and there was a huge breakthrough in that day, and it didn't have anything to do with the cloning thing. But yeah, I mean, I remember on another occasion, so we'll work our way into this. I was sitting down with a woman. This is separate, completely different story. And we're on the internet, so I do a lot of my ministry over Zoom. And she is switching about every 15 seconds. So, it's like 15 seconds, I'm talking to Sally. And then, the face changes and contorts and the eyes roll back and then come back. And it's like, okay, now I'm talking to Jessica. 15 seconds. Next thing I know, I'm talking to Steve. Whoa. 15 seconds. Next thing I know, I'm talking to Joe. 15 seconds. I was waiting for her to crawl up the wall with her back shoulder blades. Like, I was like, this is about to happen for real right now. So the things that I've seen are intense. And I was watching physical restructuring of the bones in the face with some of the switches in real time with my own eyes, right? And so eventually I just got tired of it. And I was like, stop. So I had the angels hold a part at the surface so it couldn't move. And it said, is this the original body? They're like, no. I'm like, well, that's probably part of the problem of why we can't get a grasp on anything. This person had been to many deliverance ministers, many ministries, nothing would help them. Hit the wall and everything. And I was like, where is the original body? They're like, Antarctica. Of course. That particular case was many years ago, and I wasn't fully successful in helping that individual. I did a few sessions with them, and there were certain things I asked them to do, certain things I asked them not to do. They didn't listen to any of it, frankly. Mm-hmm. And I just said, look, if we're not committed, then I can't continue to just meet with you. So that went its own direction. But that was one of my exposures to, like, if this person is not lying or their parts are not lying to me, I'm actually talking to a body that's not original. Now, if you listen to it, there's a guy out there. I actually interviewed this gentleman on my own program. His name's Tony Rodrigues, and he wrote a book called Series Colony Cavaliers. Sweet guy. And you know, one of his things was he was explaining the 20 and backs. And when he was talking about the 20 and backs, and so I'm borrowing on his information a little bit, but people can look him up. You know, he basically said as a child, they took him for 20 years on a secret space program thing. It wasn't all secret space program. He spent some time in South America, this and that. And at the end of the 20 years, the contract was up. They put him back, the time shot him back into his body as a child, and then he relived those years. And there wasn't a like awakening until after that 20 years had passed. And then suddenly, like later on in his life, he got this massive download of all these memories of everything that happened on what he called the 20 and back. And so if you work through his story, one of the things that he explains is his physical body was still living life that 20 years, but the consciousness, and it was alien grays that were involved in this, they pulled it out of him and put it in a clone body that went through some MK Ultra type stuff, and then got put on missions, and then was recruited and went to Mars, and eventually Ceres Colony, which is a Nazi colony off planet. Okay, so if any person had met him in South America, they would have met his human consciousness in a clone body, while his physical body was also physically growing up in his hometown. And that got me thinking, wait a minute. He's essentially explaining exactly what I'm running into, because they didn't destroy his physical body or put it on ice in Antarctica, but this is what I ran into with this other person. And then I started working with other people, and I would find that sometimes what I was meeting was their consciousness in clone bodies, whereas the original body was somewhere. I was actually meeting their clones, but the consciousness that's in those bodies is humanity. It's actually the soul. And this is the premise for a lot of these newer projects. Like, they are splitting the soul and doing consciousness transfers into other bodies, but not all of those bodies would look human. So sometimes people are meeting what they think are entities. There's human souls inside of these bodies. Those bodies were built. So they're not like genuine reptilians or genuine alien grays. So this further complicates the whole alien conversation, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when you realize that some of those things are actually your clients. I had another gentleman, so I'm weaving a tapestry together. His name is Benjamin Brody, and he was on my podcast. And he talked about, so he was part of a bloodline, and one of the agreements on the bloodline was that so many people would be autistic, and then they would be involved in certain operations in the spirit world. And he had a counterpart body that was reptilian that he did missions in on, I believe it was Mars. And so he had memories of that, reported that on my podcast, talked about it. And so with the human clones though, when people are in that state, maybe it is part of a 20 back, maybe it is part of some other kind of thing, but somehow they end up sitting in front of me in that condition. Now we run into weird legalities in the spirit, like, well, you know, this physical body isn't property of this person, it's property of the Chinese government or the US government or this or that, and so they don't have authority to make agreements or to get deliverance or to get this nanotech out of the body or whatever kind of deliverance we're trying to do, because we put it there and it's our property. So what we essentially have to do is to get the soul in the body to make a claim on that body on the basis of their case of injustice, that they are going to take ownership of that body as theirs. And we're able to process that through. Now I have some fancier language in the actual prayer to address like some nuance, but essentially once that is done, then we can begin administrating on that clone body, essentially the deliverance on the soul. And it works. It's as weird as that sounds. And for some people, and this is the worst part, I remember another client I had, another client that I had, you know, she was part of Project Montauk, and she actually told me about the furnaces they had under Project Montauk in New York, because once they started doing the cloning and the transference activity, they were taking people, putting them in new bodies, and then burning the original so they could never go back.
What?
That was towards the end. Now Montauk is shut down. It doesn't run anymore. It's, now it's just a park on top of a sealed off vault. I've been there. But yeah, like this stuff goes deep.